The morning sun spilled across the sprawling hills of Los Angeles, turning the glass walls of the Hale mansion into sheets of gold. The property stretched over 10 acres, manicured lawns, marble fountains, and olive trees that whispered in the breeze. But inside that mansion, despite all its beauty, silence reigned. It was a silence born not of peace, but of absence. Ethan Hale sat at the head of the long dining table, a table meant for 12, though it hadn't seen company in years. The clinking of the grandfather clock echoed faintly behind him. His breakfast, eggs, toast, and black coffee, had gone untouched. He was in his mid-30s, handsome in a quiet, distant way. His dark hair was neatly combed, his face clean-shaven, his grey eyes heavy with the kind of sadness that time never heals. Ethan had been one of the youngest tech entrepreneurs to make it to Forbes' list. Once upon a time, his smile was on magazine covers beside his wife, Anna. She was the light of his world, his muse, his reason to breathe, until the night of the accident. Since that night, laughter never returned to the mansion. Every maid, every chef, every gardener who worked here eventually left. They said they couldn't handle the ghost in the house, not because they saw one, but because they felt it. The air itself carried grief. Mrs. Patel, the elderly housekeeper, who had served the Hale family for over 2 decades, walked into the dining room carrying a clipboard. She hesitated before speaking. "Sir," she said softly, "the new maid is arriving today. Her name is Layla Evans. I thought you should know." Ethan didn't look up. Just make sure she knows the rules." He said the same words for every new hire. No entering the East Wing, no photographs, no unnecessary conversation. The East Wing was where Anna's studio had been. Ethan hadn't allowed anyone to clean it, not even touch the doorknob. By noon, a soft knock echoed through the hall. Mrs. Patel went to answer it, and there she was, the new maid. Layla Evans stood at the doorstep holding a small brown suitcase. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched the strap of her worn leather bag. She was 24, modestly dressed in a navy blue uniform, her hair tied in a loose braid. Her eyes, large, kind, and uncertain, scanned the marble staircase and glittering chandeliers in quiet awe. She wasn't used to places like this. Mrs. Patel gave her a gentle smile. "Welcome, my dear. This house can be intimidating, but do your work well and Mr. Hale will appreciate it." Layla nodded politely. "Thank you, ma'am. I'll do my best." She didn't know that her first meeting with her employer would change both their lives forever. Later that afternoon, as she dusted the hallway near the staircase, she heard slow footsteps behind her. She turned and froze. Ethan Hale stood there dressed in a black suit, a file in one hand. He was coming down the stairs when his eyes fell on her, and then he stopped. His entire body went rigid. His breath caught. Layla blinked, confused. "Sir?" Ethan's heart pounded violently. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Her eyes, the same gentle hazel, her lips, the same delicate curve, her voice, even that soft tone, it was Anna's. The resemblance was not just similar, it was hauntingly identical. He gripped the staircase railing, his knuckles white as memories crashed into him like waves. The car accident, the funeral, the silence that followed. And now before him stood a woman who looked exactly like the wife he buried 3 years ago. Mrs. Patel came out from the kitchen and noticed the tension. "Sir, are you all right?" Ethan didn't answer. He just stared, lost somewhere between past and present. Layla lowered her gaze, uncomfortable. She didn't understand why the rich man was staring at her with such disbelief, as if he had seen a ghost. Finally, Ethan turned abruptly and walked away, his footsteps echoing down the marble floor. Mrs. Patel frowned and whispered to herself, "Strange. I've never seen him look at anyone like that." As Layla resumed her cleaning, she caught her reflection in a hallway mirror, and for a fleeting moment, even she thought she looked like someone else. Someone familiar, someone she had seen in an old photograph once, but couldn't remember where. And upstairs in the master bedroom, Ethan stood before a framed portrait on the wall, a portrait of his late wife, Anna Hale. The resemblance was terrifying. Her face, her eyes, even the way her hair fell over her shoulder. It was as if Anna had returned, under a new name. And for the first time in years, Ethan whispered into the silence, "Anna?" But there was no answer, only the sound, of the wind brushing against the mansion's lonely walls. The maid who looked exactly like his late wife had arrived, and nothing in that house would ever be the same again. The following morning, the Hale mansion felt different. The air was still, yet there was something new in it, a quiet pulse of life, faint but undeniable. For the first time in years, there was movement in the halls, soft footsteps echoing across the marble floors, the clinking of dishes being carefully washed, the distant hum of a vacuum cleaner. Layla woke early, long before sunrise. She was used to hard work. Back in her small apartment in East LA, she used to rise before dawn to catch the bus to her previous job as a hotel cleaner. This new job paid better, though she still couldn't believe she was working for Ethan Hale, one of the most private millionaires in California. She had no idea how her life was about to change. Mrs. Patel handed her a set of keys and a notebook. "This," she said kindly, "is your daily schedule. You'll be in charge of cleaning the West Wing, the dining area, and occasionally the library. Do not, under any circumstances, go into the East Wing. It's personal to Mr. Hale." Layla nodded obediently. "I understand." The older woman studied her face for a moment. "You remind me of someone," she murmured, almost to herself. Layla smiled faintly, brushing it off. "People say that a lot." I don't know why, but by afternoon she started to notice things. Every time she passed the hallway, she felt someone watching her. The mansion's security cameras blinked red, but it wasn't the cameras that unsettled her. It was him. Ethan Hale rarely left his study. He worked in silence, staring at his computer screens, his phone constantly buzzing with board meeting calls and investor updates. Yet every so often, when Layla came by to deliver tea or clean the nearby hallway, she would catch his reflection in the glass, watching her. He never said a word, never smiled, but his eyes followed her. That evening, while cleaning the library, she accidentally found an old book lying open on the table. It was a photo album, dusty and faded. Out of curiosity, she brushed her hand across the page and froze. The photograph staring back at her showed Ethan, younger, happier, standing beside a woman. The woman was her mirror image. Same eyes, same soft jawline, the same little freckle near the right side of her nose. Layla's hands began to tremble. What is this?" she whispered. Before she could turn the page, the heavy door creaked open. Ethan stood there. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. His expression was unreadable, though his voice, when it came, was low and strained. "You shouldn't be touching that." Layla immediately stepped back, heart racing. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean to. I was just cleaning," and he walked slowly toward her, his gaze fixed on her face. "Do you know her?" he asked suddenly. "Who?" He pointed to the photograph. "Anna Hale, my wife." Layla looked again at the picture, at the woman who looked like her twin, and shook her head. "No, sir. I've never met her." Ethan stared at her as if trying to catch her in a lie. Then, to her surprise, his tone softened. "You look exactly like her." Layla swallowed hard. "I'm sorry if that makes you uncomfortable." He blinked slowly. "No, it's not that." He turned away, running a hand through his hair. "It's just, after 3 years, I thought I'd never see that face again." The silence stretched between them, heavy and strange. Layla didn't know what to say. When she finally left the room, Ethan stayed behind, staring at the photograph of his late wife. For the first time in years, he didn't feel numb. He felt haunted. That night, he couldn't sleep. He poured himself a glass of whiskey and sat by the large window overlooking the city lights. His mind played tricks on him, Anna's laughter echoing faintly, her perfume lingering in the air, her voice whispering his name, and then, from the reflection in the glass, he saw movement behind him. Layla, walking past the hallway with a tray of dishes, her shadow briefly falling across the floor when graceful. Familiar, he turned sharply. For a split second, he could have sworn it was Anna, alive and walking through his home. His pulse quickened and he pressed a hand to his chest. "What's happening to me?" he murmured under his breath. The next morning, when Layla came downstairs to start her chores, she found a note waiting on the kitchen counter. "Report to the East Wing at 9 a.m., Mr. Hale." Mrs. Patel's eyes widened when she saw it. "The East Wing? He never lets anyone go there." Layla hesitated. "Should I go?" The older woman looked uneasy. "If he asked, then yes." But be careful, child. That part of the house holds more sorrow than dust. At exactly 9 o'clock, Layla walked through the silent corridor that led to the forbidden wing. The double doors were tall and dark, their handles cold under her fingers. When she pushed them open, she gasped. Inside was a preserved world, untouched, frozen in time. A studio filled with canvases, half-finished paintings, a piano covered with dust, and on the wall, dozens of portraits of Anna. And standing in the middle of that haunting room was Ethan Hale, his eyes glistening with something between grief and confusion. He turned to her and whispered, almost in disbelief, "Layla, tell me the truth. Who are you?" Layla's breath hitched, fear flickering in her eyes. "I told you, sir. I'm just a maid." But Ethan shook his head slowly. "No," he said, his voice trembling. "You're not just anything. You're the second chance I was never supposed to have." Outside, thunder rumbled faintly over the hills, and the first drops of rain touched the mansion's glass roof, as if the heavens themselves had begun to weep. Rain lashed against the wide glass panes of the Hale mansion, as if the heavens had decided to release years of silence all at once. The storm outside was wild, but inside the east wing, that forbidden part of the mansion, the air was heavier still. Layla stood frozen near the doorway, her hand still resting on the polished handle she had just turned. She hadn't expected this room to feel so alive, so full of memories she didn't own. Every inch of the space was preserved, just as it must have been the day Anna Hale died. A white piano sat quietly by the window, a silk scarf still hanging from its side as though waiting to be touched. An easel with a half-finished painting stood nearby, colors faded but emotions intact. And then there were the portraits, dozens of them, some in frames, some still pinned to corkboards, some lying on the floor, all painted by Ethan himself. She recognized the style immediately. She'd seen his name on gallery pieces before, but what shook her to the core was the face on every canvas. It was hers, or rather Anna's. Ethan turned toward her. His usually cold, calculated demeanor seemed shattered. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, his tie loose, and his voice sounded fragile, stripped of all the power people associated with his name. "I built this room for her," he said quietly. "Every brushstroke, every note she played on that piano, it's all I have left of her." Layla didn't move. She couldn't. Her throat tightened as she whispered, "Why did you ask me to come here, sir?" He hesitated, then walked closer, too close. "Because I need to understand what's happening to me," he said, eyes flicking over her face. "When I look at you, I feel alive again, but I also feel like I'm losing my mind." Layla took a step back, trembling. "Mr. Hale, I'm just your employee. I don't know why I look like her." But Ethan wasn't convinced. His voice lowered, almost desperate. "Do you believe in coincidences?" She shook her head nervously. "Sometimes, yes." He leaned in slightly, his gaze piercing. "Not me, I don't. I believe everything happens for a reason. You came into this house looking like the woman I loved, the woman I buried with my own hands. And you expect me to believe it's chance?" Layla felt her heartbeat in her ears. "Sir, please, this is making me uncomfortable." Ethan blinked, stepping back abruptly as if waking from a trance. He rubbed his face, exhaling shakily. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to frighten you." There was an awkward silence between them, broken only by the rain tapping the windows like restless fingers. "Tell me about yourself," Ethan said suddenly. "Where did you grow up?" Layla hesitated. "In a foster home, mostly. My parents died when I was a baby. I don't even know what they looked like." Ethan's eyes narrowed, curiosity igniting. "You never saw a photo? Nothing?" She shook her head. "No, the home told me I was found at a bus station in San Diego when I was barely 2 months old." Ethan turned away, staring at one of the portraits. His mind began to spin. Timelines, faces, coincidences, everything tangled in confusion. Anna Hale had always wanted children, but the pregnancy they tried for had ended in heartbreak. Still, there was something haunting about Layla's story, something that didn't feel random. He whispered, almost to himself, "San Diego." Layla frowned. "Is something wrong?" Ethan forced a faint smile. "No, nothing. You can go back to your work now." But as she turned to leave, he stopped her again. "Wait," she turned slowly. "Would you mind sitting for a portrait?" Layla blinked. "A portrait?" "Yes," Ethan said softly. "I used to paint." I stopped after she passed. "But I want to try again, one last time." Layla hesitated. "Sir, I don't think—" "I'll pay you extra for your time," he interrupted gently. "It's just art, nothing else." His tone was calm now, but his eyes, though soft, carried the kind of intensity that could draw anyone in. Against her better judgment, Layla nodded. "All right, if it helps." That evening, the storm outside grew fiercer. The lights flickered as thunder rolled across the hills. Ethan set up his easel under the soft glow of the chandelier. Layla sat on a chair near the piano, the same one Anna had once played. For a while, neither of them spoke. Only the faint sound of the brush moving over the canvas filled the silence. Ethan's focus was absolute. His eyes darted from her face to the portrait, to the shadows under her eyes, to the curve of her lips. Layla sat still, unsure of what to feel. At one point she asked softly, "Did she love you very much?" Ethan's brush froze. He looked up, eyes distant. "She did, and I loved her more than I ever thought I could love anyone. But I couldn't protect her." "What happened to her?" Layla asked, her voice almost a whisper. He hesitated, his jaw tightening. "It was a rainy night, like this one. We were driving home from a charity gala. I was arguing with her about something stupid. She wanted to adopt a child. I said we weren't ready. I took my eyes off the road for 2 seconds." He swallowed hard. And then there was nothing. Just glass, rain, and silence. Layla's chest tightened. "I'm sorry," he smiled bitterly. "So am I." Minutes passed. The storm raged louder. Finally, Ethan put the brush down and stepped aside. "Come look." Layla stood, walking to the canvas, paused and gasped. It wasn't just a portrait. It was a resurrection. He had captured her, not as she was now, but as Anna once had been. The same light in her eyes, the same delicate sadness. It was as though he had painted her soul, not her face. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Ethan's gaze lingered on her, and he said quietly, "It's not the painting that's beautiful. Layla, it's the reminder that maybe I haven't lost everything after all." She didn't know what to say, so she said nothing. Later that night, long after Layla had gone to her small maid's quarters, Ethan stayed in the East Wing. He couldn't take his eyes off the painting. Something inside him stirred, something he had buried deep beneath grief and guilt, and in the stillness of that room, illuminated by flashes of lightning, he whispered, "Anna, if you sent her back to me, I'll never make the same mistake again." He didn't know that Layla, awake in her small room, was staring at an old scar on her shoulder, a scar she'd had since infancy, shaped like a crescent moon. She didn't know that Anna Hale had once worn a silver locket, engraved with that very same shape. Fate, it seemed, was only beginning to weave its web. The following days passed like a quiet storm, calm on the outside, but charged with an invisible tension that hummed through the Hale mansion like a current. Layla went about her duties as usual, dusting the grand hallways, polishing the silverware, folding linens that no one ever used. But she could feel it. The air had changed. Ethan Hale had begun to reappear. For 3 years, he had lived like a ghost among his own wealth, silent, detached, moving through his mansion as though time no longer applied to him. But since Layla's arrival, something within him had awakened. He started leaving his study door open, sometimes even joining Mrs. Patel for morning coffee. The staff whispered that the master seemed different, softer, almost human again. Layla noticed it too. Sometimes when she carried breakfast to his office, she would find him sketching at his desk, lost in thought. Other times he would stand by the window, gazing at the garden as though he were searching for something beyond the horizon. But he always greeted her with a polite nod, distant yet not cold. Still, there was a strange pull between them, something neither could name. It wasn't love. Not yet, it was recognition. A strange, inexplicable familiarity. One afternoon, while Layla was arranging flowers in the dining hall, Ethan appeared suddenly in the doorway. He was holding a small, worn-out notebook. "Layla," he said quietly. She looked up, startled. "Yes, sir?" He approached, his footsteps echoing lightly on the marble. "I found something," he said, placing the notebook on the table. "It was Anna's journal." Layla froze. Ethan hesitated before opening the cover. The handwriting was elegant, flowing, filled with the kind of warmth that had been missing from the house for years. "She wrote about things I never understood before," he said softly. "Her loneliness, her wish to be a mother, her faith that souls can find each other again, even after death. Layla listened quietly, her hands still clutching the bouquet. Ethan turned a page, then stopped. Here, he pointed to a passage written in faint ink. Sometimes I dream of a little girl born somewhere far from me. I can never see her face, but I know she carries a scar on her shoulder, shaped like a crescent moon. I think she's the daughter I'll never have. The words hit Layla like a blow. Her heart pounded violently. Her hand trembled as she reached for her left shoulder instinctively. The small crescent-shaped scar she had always wondered about. Ethan didn't notice at first. He kept reading, lost in his grief. She wrote this 2 weeks before the accident. I thought it was just poetic nonsense. Until now. Layla's voice barely escaped her throat. Sir, can I see that page? He handed it to her. Her eyes darted over the words, her pulse quickening with every line. Her head felt light, the world spinning around her. She stammered, clutching her shoulder. I have that scar. Ethan froze. What? She looked up, tears pooling in her eyes. I have a crescent-shaped scar here, since I was a baby. The doctors at the foster home said I was found wrapped in a blanket near a bus stop. Nobody knew where I came from. Ethan's face went pale. The air between them turned heavy, dense with unspoken possibility. He stepped closer, his voice low. Layla, what are you saying? She shook her head, trembling. I don't know. Maybe it's just a coincidence, but what if it's not? For a long time, Ethan said nothing. His eyes searched hers, the same hazel eyes that had once belonged to Anna. Finally, he whispered, No, it can't be. Hannah and I never had children. Layla's voice cracked. But what if she did and you didn't know? What if she trailed off, her words dissolving in confusion and disbelief. Ethan turned away, running a hand through his hair, pacing like a man fighting with reality itself. No, that's impossible. She miscarried. The doctor confirmed it, but something in his tone betrayed doubt. He looked at the notebook again. The words on the page seemed to glow beneath the light. If I die before I hold her, may God let my soul find her in another way. Ethan's breath hitched. He dropped into a chair, his face buried in his hands. Anna, he whispered. Layla stepped forward slowly. Mr. Hale, what if I'm that child? He looked up, his eyes wide, hollow. You can't be, he said, but his voice broke halfway. That night, he ordered Mrs. Patel to find any documents from Anna's medical records, adoption agencies and hospitals she had once visited. The old housekeeper hesitated but obeyed. Days turned into a blur. Ethan barely slept. He spent hours digging through boxes, papers, and old hospital reports. Layla, too, found herself restless. Every dream she had lately felt vivid. Flashes of music, a soft voice humming a lullaby, the faint scent of jasmine. One evening, she walked quietly into the east wing again. The piano still sat there under a thin layer of dust. She sat before it hesitantly, placing her fingers on the keys, and without realizing it, she began to play. A melody flowed, slow, mournful, but hauntingly familiar. Her hands moved with a grace she didn't know she possessed. Ethan, passing by the hallway, stopped dead in his tracks. His eyes widened in disbelief. He knew that song. Anna used to play it every night before bed, a lullaby she had composed for their unborn child. He stepped into the room, his voice trembling. Layla, where did you learn that song? Layla turned, startled. I don't know. It just came to me. Ethan's chest tightened. He felt tears prick his eyes. That was Anna's song. She called it For My Daughter. The silence that followed was unbearable. Layla stared at him, tears spilling down her cheeks. Then maybe I didn't just come here for a job, she whispered. Ethan walked closer, his expression raw, vulnerable, as though the walls around his heart were finally breaking. Maybe, he said softly, you came home. The clock struck midnight. Rain pattered softly outside. And in that room filled with memories of love and loss, two souls, bound by grief, time, and something far greater than blood, realized they were standing on the edge of a miracle. Neither knew what tomorrow would bring, but both could feel it in their bones. The past had found a way to return. The following morning dawned grey and heavy. The storm had passed, but the Hale mansion felt more unsettled than ever. The air smelled of rain and secrets. Somewhere between dawn and daylight, The house itself seemed to breathe again, as if the walls had overheard the truth that neither Ethan nor Layla could yet accept aloud. Layla barely slept that night. She lay in her small attic room, staring at the ceiling, her mind spinning in circles. Every thought pulled her back to that scar, the crescent moon on her shoulder. She could still hear Ethan's voice echoing in her ears. That was Anna's song. She called it "For My Daughter." She pressed a hand against her chest. Could it really be possible? Could she be Anna Hale's lost child? She thought of her life, growing up in the foster system, moving from one house to another, never belonging anywhere, never knowing why she always dreamed of a woman with soft brown hair humming that same melody. A woman who smiled through tears, calling her "my little moon." She had thought it was just imagination, but maybe it had always been memory. Downstairs, Ethan Hale sat in his study surrounded by papers, photographs and old hospital records. His usually impeccable posture was gone. He was slumped forward, eyes red. Exhaustion etched into every line of his face. The storm of doubt was tearing him apart. He had found the old medical report from the night Anna lost their baby. But something wasn't right. The report mentioned a complication, but no clear statement of a stillbirth. Just one cryptic note scribbled by a nurse. Infant transferred to secondary ward per emergency protocol. Transferred? To where? He ran his hands through his hair, trembling. Why didn't I see this before? Mrs. Patel entered quietly, holding a tray of tea. She stopped when she saw the mess of papers. "Sir, you haven't eaten since yesterday." He looked up, his eyes distant. "Mrs. Patel, you were with us when it happened. Do you remember anything strange that night?" The old woman hesitated, frowning. "It was chaos, sir. The accident. The hospital staff were rushing everywhere. They said the baby was gone. I didn't question it." Ethan nodded slowly, gripping the paper tighter. But what if they lied? What if she lived? Mrs. Patel gasped. "Sir, you don't mean—" He looked up at her, his voice breaking. "Layla." There was a silence that filled the room like thunder without sound. Mrs. Patel's eyes widened, realization dawning. "Oh my God!" The resemblance in her age. The scar. Ethan stood abruptly. "I have to know. I can't live like this, wondering." That afternoon he called his private investigator, someone he had used years ago for corporate disputes. "I need you to find a hospital record from St. Helena's Medical Center," Ethan instructed. "Date March 7th, 3 years before Anna died. Look for any infant transferred to a secondary ward. The name might be blank." The man promised results within 48 hours. Meanwhile, Layla continued her chores, though her mind was anywhere but on her work. Every time she passed Ethan's study, she wanted to knock, to ask what he had found, to tell him what she was remembering. But something inside her held back. Perhaps it was fear. Fear that the truth, once spoken, could destroy whatever fragile bond had begun to grow between them. That evening, unable to bear the silence any longer, Layla went back to the East Wing, the studio where everything had begun. The scent of paint and old wood still lingered. The portrait Ethan had painted of her, or of Anna, stood by the window, half covered with a cloth. She pulled the cloth away and stared. The eyes in the painting seemed alive, filled with longing, like a reflection of her own confusion. She reached out and touched the edge of the canvas, whispering, "Who am I?" Behind her, a voice answered softly, "That's what I've been asking myself too." She turned sharply. Ethan stood in the doorway, wearing a simple grey sweater and black trousers. No longer the distant millionaire, but just a man searching for meaning. His eyes were tired but gentle. Layla's lips parted. "Did you find something?" He nodded slowly. "Maybe. Not yet confirmed, but there are inconsistencies in the hospital report. Enough to make me believe they might have hidden the baby's survival." Layla felt her knees weaken. "Why would they do that?" Ethan exhaled. Anna had a rare blood condition. The doctors warned her the baby might not survive delivery. When she lost consciousness after the crash, the staff might have declared the child stillborn prematurely, or worse, transferred her elsewhere under the wrong record. Layla pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. "You mean—" "Someone could have taken me, or someone tried to save you," Ethan said softly. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Layla, I need to know. I want to order a DNA test, if you'll allow it." She stared at him, speechless. Part of her wanted to scream yes immediately, to know once and for all. But another part of her trembled at the thought. What if it wasn't true? What if the hope in his eyes shattered again? "Are you sure you want to know?" she whispered. "What if—" "I'm not her." Ethan's voice softened. "Then I'll still be grateful you came, because you reminded me what it means to feel alive again." Layla's throat tightened. Tears filled her eyes, but she nodded. "All right, do it." Over the next few days, the mansion became a waiting room for destiny. The staff could feel it, the strange tension that clung to every wall. Ethan grew quieter, though not cold. He would pass Layla in the hallways and give a small nod, sometimes lingering as though afraid she might vanish. Layla, in turn, felt drawn to him, in a way she couldn't explain. Not romantically, but spiritually. As if her soul had found its missing half, not through love but through recognition. On the fourth evening, the investigator called. Ethan answered with shaking hands. "Yes, sir," the man said. "I've traced the file. You were right." The infant wasn't registered as deceased. She was transferred under a coded file number and later placed in the city's foster system under the name Layla Evans. The phone nearly slipped from Ethan's hand. His knees gave way and he sank into the nearest chair, tears welling in his eyes. "Are you certain?" he whispered. "Positive. I cross-checked birthmarks and medical notes. The crescent-shaped scar is listed as identification." "So she's your daughter?" Ethan's breath caught. The world tilted. He hung up, unable to speak, and sat there in silence, tears sliding down his face, slow, disbelieving, grateful tears that felt like redemption after years of punishment. Layla was in the kitchen when he entered. She looked up, startled by the expression on his face, a mixture of joy, grief, and love so deep it broke her heart. "Mr. Hale?" she asked softly. He crossed the room slowly, his voice trembling. "No, not Mr. Hale," she blinked. "Sir?" He stopped in front of her, his eyes shining. "I know who you are." Her breath hitched. He took a shaking breath. "You're Anna's daughter." "My daughter?" For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Layla dropped the dish she was holding. It shattered on the marble floor, but she didn't even flinch. Tears flooded her eyes as Ethan stepped closer, trembling. He raised his hands slowly, as though afraid she might disappear, and whispered, "My little moon." The words unlocked something deep inside her, a memory, a sound, a feeling, and she broke down sobbing, throwing her arms around him. Ethan held her tightly, his body shaking with emotion. Years of grief poured out in that embrace, years of unanswered prayers, of empty halls of loneliness neither had deserved. And in that moment, under the silent gaze of the chandeliers, the Hale mansion, once a tomb of sorrow, finally came alive again. Outside, the evening sun pierced through the clouds, casting warm light across the garden. After 3 long years, the house had found its heart again, and Ethan Hale had found the one piece of Anna he thought he had lost forever. The night after the revelation was unlike any other. The Hale mansion, once an echo chamber of loneliness and grief, seemed to hum softly with something new: life, forgiveness, love. The storm clouds that had haunted its glass roof for years were gone. Outside, the garden shimmered under moonlight, raindrops glinting like pearls on the leaves. Inside, in the grand hall where portraits of ancestors once watched over empty dinners, Ethan and Layla sat together at the long oak table. There was no luxury tonight, no servants, no formality, just a father and daughter trying to find their way through the strange, fragile wonder of reunion. Neither had eaten much, though Mrs. Patel had cooked a full meal to celebrate God's miracle. Ethan looked across the table, studying Layla's face in the flickering candlelight, the same soft jawline, the same eyes that once looked at him from across their bed, filled with Anna's kindness. It felt impossible, yet every part of him knew it was real. The investigators' report, the DNA confirmation that arrived that afternoon, even the small locket Layla had unknowingly carried her whole life, all of it proved what his heart already believed. Layla Evans was Layla Hale, his daughter Anna's child. He smiled faintly. "You know, I used to sit here every night waiting for silence to speak back. Now it finally has a voice." Layla's eyes glistened. "I still can't believe it, sir. I mean, Dad." The word Dad left her lips awkwardly, like a sound she wasn't used to forming. Ethan's breath caught. He looked down, blinking fast to hide his tears. "You don't have to say it if it feels strange," he murmured. But Layla shook her head. "It doesn't feel strange, it feels right, like something that's been waiting inside me all these years." They sat quietly for a while. The fireplace crackled softly, filling the space with warmth that neither of them had known for far too long. Then Layla whispered, "Do you think she knows?" Ethan didn't have to ask who she meant. His gaze shifted toward the piano in the corner, the same one Anna had loved. "If there's anything after this life," he said softly, "then yes, she knows. And she's smiling right now." He paused, exhaling deeply. "You look so much like her, but it's not just your face. It's the way you speak, the way you listen, even the way you walk. It's as if she's alive again through you." Layla smiled faintly, wiping away tears. "Sometimes I feel like I've been hearing her voice my whole life, in dreams, in songs, even in the wind. I thought I was crazy." Ethan leaned back, his voice trembling. "You weren't crazy. She never left you." Silence fell again, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that feels like prayer. After dinner, Layla wandered toward the east wing, now no longer forbidden, but sacred. Ethan followed quietly, watching as she sat before the white piano. Her fingers hovered over the keys, for a moment before she began to play the lullaby again, "For my daughter." The melody floated through the mansion, gentle and eternal. Ethan closed his eyes, tears slipping down his cheeks as he listened. He could almost see Anna there beside them, smiling, radiant, at peace. When the song ended, Layla turned and whispered, "Will you tell me about her?" Ethan nodded. He spoke for hours. He told her how Anna had been a painter who believed every soul had color, that love was blue, grief was gray, and forgiveness was gold. How she had met him when he was a reckless young CEO, all ego and ambition, and taught him that money meant nothing without meaning. How she used to sneak stray cats into the mansion and name them after stars. Layla laughed through her tears, hanging on every word. She had never known her mother, but in Ethan's stories she began to see her, not as a ghost or a memory, but as a living part of herself. When Ethan finished, the night was deep and quiet. Only the sound of the wind brushing through the olive trees could be heard. He stood and walked to the cabinet in the corner, pulling out a small wooden box. "I kept this for years," he said, voice trembling. "It was meant for her child and for you." He opened the box. Inside lay a silver locket shaped like a crescent moon. Layla gasped softly. "I've seen this before," she whispered. "In my dreams." Ethan smiled weakly. "It was Anna's. She wore it the day of the accident. They found it at the crash site. I had it restored, but I could never bring myself to open it." He handed it to her. "It belongs to you." With trembling hands, Layla opened the locket. Inside was a tiny, faded photograph. Anna smiling, cradling her pregnant belly. On the opposite side, engraved words read, "For my little moon, even if I can't hold you, I'll love you across worlds." Layla's sobs came quietly at first, then uncontrollably. Ethan pulled her into his arms and held her as she cried, against his chest. Years of longing, confusion, and pain finally melting away. When she could finally speak, she whispered, "I feel like I've come home." Ethan's voice was hoarse. "You have." Days turned into weeks, and for the first time in a decade, laughter returned to the Hale mansion. Ethan had the place renovated, but not to erase the past, to honor it. He reopened Anna's art studio, turning it into a gallery where Layla could paint. Mrs. Patel, ever the watchful guardian, often stood by the door, smiling like a proud mother. Layla began taking evening classes in art, just as her mother once had. She found that the moment she touched a brush, her hands moved naturally, painting skies, faces, and dreams she didn't know she remembered. Ethan watched her from a distance sometimes, feeling a quiet peace settle into his bones. He had spent years chasing success, thinking it could fill the emptiness left by loss. But it wasn't wealth that healed him, it was her. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the garden shimmered gold, Ethan and Layla stood together outside by Anna's memorial stone, a white marble slab surrounded by jasmine and lilies. Layla knelt, tracing the inscription with her fingers. Anna Hale, beloved wife, artist, dreamer. Wherever you are, love will find you. A soft breeze swept across the garden, carrying with it the faint scent of jasmine. Layla looked up at the sky, tears glistening, but no longer sorrowful. She found us, she whispered. Ethan nodded, his voice thick with emotion. Yes, she did. For a long time, they stood there in silence, a father and daughter bound not by blood alone, but by destiny, by a love that had traveled through loss, time, and heaven itself. As they turned to walk back toward the mansion, the last rays of sunlight bathed them in gold. The house that had once been a monument to grief now glowed softly, alive again, with the sound of footsteps, laughter, and music. That night, before going to bed, Layla placed the silver locket on her bedside table. Through the open window, the moonlight touched it gently, a crescent-shaped reflection glowing on her wall. She smiled, whispering into the night, "Good night, Mama." And somewhere, in the quiet rhythm of the wind that moved through the garden, it almost felt like someone whispered back, "Good night, my little moon." The Hale mansion slept peacefully for the first time in years. The circle was complete, and love, as always, had found its way home.